Woodshaft is largely protected by static defensive turrets and weapon emplacements. In space, several defensive satellites bolster our defenses. Most of our ships are lightly armed, and that's including civilian ships and merchant vessels. But we do have a small fleet at our disposal. 3 light destroyers, 10 corvettes, and over 30 frigates and gunships. Not much, but it works, Uriel answered, silently eyeing the princess. We will take you up on the offer of 3 freighters, and we wish to claim your destroyers, nothing more. Are there no mercenary groups in the station? She asked. Only 2 groups remained before this whole disaster broke out. The rest ran when the Castons tried to force Woodshaft to pledge allegiance to Duke Draymore under the rights of patronage, he chuckled. Luckily for us, the Castons were never our patrons. They only turned a blind eye to our operations for a cut of the gains. Greedy, shifty bastards. So I told them where they could shove it a few hours before you lot arrived. I see. That is indeed fortunate. And the mercenaries? Clara pressed on. No good. Greener than my plants over there. They're planet-siders, Uriel replied. Clara sighed. They'll serve a purpose, I suppose? Are there any individuals of renown? Princess, this is a smuggler den, not a recruitment center. Anyone worth a damn left when they could. Although, are you only looking for meat for the grinder? He asked tentatively. No, soldiers are most welcome, but anyone with talent will be highly sought after, no matter their role, rank, profession, or status, she answered. In that case, there is one such guy here. He's a technician, wacky, short-tempered, and a pain in the ass. But if it is broken, he can fix it. The only problem is that he's a Yikanti, Uriel said, smirking. If he agrees to come, or we can establish a labor contract, then I will happily welcome him on board. They are rare, but there are aliens serving within the Principality's military. I see not why a Yikanti should be an exception, she replied dryly. I'll contact him after we discuss the most important thing of this transaction. He took a final drag of his cigarette and took his sweet time, exhaling the smoke slowly. Payment. Certainly, Clara agreed and brought up her left arm. A section of her armor beneath her forearm parted open, and a scroll of paper and a data chit emerged from it. She took them and then placed them on the desk. This paper, she began, tapping at the paper twice, grants Woodshaft full salvage rights to the vessels that survived the battle on the Caston side, which includes the battlecruiser. Uriel's eyes went wide at the declaration and reached for the paper, reading it quickly. Why don't you claim it? He finally asked after a minute of silence. The vessel would be a fine addition were it not for how heavily damaged it is. It would take us considerable time to repair it, scour for sabotage attempts made by Draymore loyalists, and bring it back into full service. Time is a luxury we can't ill afford right now. Instead, we'll let you keep it and the other remaining vessels as prized salvage in exchange for the requested supplies. She paused for a moment, then continued. That includes, of course, the lives of those trapped in those vessels. What makes you think I care for the lives of the blue-blooded scum that tried to seize my station in the first place? Uriel asked, eyes narrowed. Do with them as you wish. I care not for the lives of those traitors, but what about the commoners, those forced to serve against their will? Some have gladly joined our side, but the rest? Are you going to abandon them to their fate for the decisions made by true traitors? Clara asked, slightly leaning forth, her purple eyes piercing Uriel's gray ones. She's treating lives as currency. That is, I don't know how to feel about that, Wyatt thought, only slightly turning his head at Clara. On one hand, it left a bad taste in his mouth that the otherwise amicable princess was so casually treating thousands of lives like that. But on the other hand, he recognized it as a merciful act. The ships and the crews would be destroyed regardless, so now she was using them in her favor and potentially saving those lives. Inside, he felt another notch of respect grow for the princess. As part of the main Astor bloodline, the lives of every commoner and lesser noble were hers to do as she pleased. And yet she chooses a path of mercy that benefits her, but mercy nevertheless. Deciding to trust what little he'd seen of Clara so far, he relaxed and continued to pay close attention to the exchange. Clever, princess. My implants and my education were all I got from my worthless father. I've always seen myself as a commoner more than asshat noble. Leaving those men and women to die. He hummed deeply and tapped at his desk a dozen times before continuing. The battlecruiser alone covers the cost of what you desire, even with what you already scavenged from it. Naturally, Clara replied, not missing a beat. But the lives of so many people? Very well, Princess. You have yourself a deal. The freighters and the destroyers are yours. Will they be crewed by your people? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Hopefully that won't be the case. We are stretched thin as it is, Clara replied, now turning to the data chit. Will you inform the mercenaries and that Yikanti technician of my offer? Already done, Uriel replied, smirking. Jincho already accepted. So have the mercenaries. Should I tell them where to meet you? After we are done with our business here, Uriel. For now, let us move to our second topic of discussion, said the blonde woman. Ah, Uriel let out, eyes narrowing. So that's why you offer me the survivors. You wish to take personnel from Woodshaft, but since you don't want to resort to conscription, I assume you have another offer on the table? Clara nodded. Within this chit is an authorization and royal warrant that'll give Woodshaft complete and total autonomy under the banner of House Astor itself. We won't be your patrons, but Woodshaft shall enjoy our protection, credibility, and legality needed to operate freely, without having to pay fees outside a binding contract of loyalty, she replied, stoic and firm, while Uriel and Wyatt mirrored the same shocked expression. It also confers the overseer of Woodshaft the right of succession, be it a bloodline or by mentorship. I'm certain you can appreciate the security of not dealing with potential usurpers taking away your throne at any given moment. She tapped the chit again. Additionally, it also offers every soul currently living and operating in Woodshaft a royal pardon for minor crimes committed and an invitation to join our cause and end the threat of Duke Draymore. Clara paused for a moment. In exchange, we need an alternative jump point for us to use leading into Finnegan territory. Unless, of course, you can assure me that there won't be Caiston or Draymore loyalists waiting for us on the other side of the regular route already? Uriel looked at the chit with incredulous eyes, then up at Clara, then down at the chit again. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he leaned back on his chair and let out a long, hard exhale. It seems I am checkmated. That offer is too good to pass up, he smirked, leaning forth and staring into Clara's eyes. I'm surprised you didn't try to offer me a noble title, Princess. Otherwise, I would have rejected you on the spot. Not only a pretty face, but a brilliant mind behind those cold eyes. Then he raised a finger. However, I have one condition you must agree with before I accept. Checkmated, but not powerless yet. If we are to start this relationship on the right foot, then let's rub our shoulders a little more, shall we? It depends on what you have in mind, Uriel, Clara retorted, unflinching and unwavering. Wyatt was at a loss for words, but thankful that he was given the chance to see Clara in action. Is this the sort of thing a princess deals with? Let me shoot at pirates any day before I get to handle this sort of stuff. You have a way with words, son. Maybe you should consider joining the diplomatic corps instead, or needlessly risking your life, he thought, remembering the words of his father back on Volantis. A screen lowered itself on Uriel's left, coming to rest a few inches above the desk, so that his three guests could have a clear view of it. Then the screen came to life, showing a rough tactical display of Woodshaft, the moon it was orbiting, the nearby planet, and the full extent of its sensor range, which was considerable. You see, Princess, the Caistons were up to something before you arrived. I wasn't aware those strange stealth ships were even in the system. Too many ships come and go for us to register every warp signature we get. However, the battlecruiser is another beast entirely. When it arrived, it didn't head to the rest of the fleet right away. It moved in another direction, suddenly stopped, and turned back mere hours before you lot arrived. As he spoke, the display showed the movement patterns of the battlecruiser. Then another dot appeared next to where the prince's fleet waited. As the dot began to move at ludicrous speed, he continued. Does it look familiar? Wyatt stared at the moving dot, made a quick note of its point of origin, the vector it was heading, and spoke up out of instinct. That's the black ship that survived the battle, isn't it? Give the lapdog a prize. Yes, that's precisely it. Now watch closely, Uriel said in a playful tone. The dot on the display kept moving, and soon reached the same vector the battlecruiser was heading towards, quickly matched it, and moved forth until it finally came to a halt, only for it to vanish. Roughly 20 minutes ago, the trail died. How were you able to track it in the first place? All of our sensors bounce back unless we are close enough for the cameras to detect the plume of the engines, Wyatt asked, surprised and eager to know if there was a way to counter those ships. You're right. Whatever those blasted ships are made out of makes them nearly impossible to scan, lock on, or keep track of without direct visual confirmation. This ship, though, got unlucky. 1 or 2 lucky hits got it good. The trail we detected is leaked radiation. My sensor array operators nearly discarded it, but the speed of the trail gave it away. The display zoomed in to reveal a small station bored into an asteroid. The station itself was barely visible due to the distance and the limitations of the telescope, but it was there. I have no records of that station ever existing, so it is either a new one or a closely kept secret. Probably a military station or a repair docking station, Uriel added. Take over the station, place it under my command, and you'll have your safe access. Well, as safe as an unstable jump point can be, but no ship has been lost in over 10 years. I see, Clara replied, while her eyes were focused on the screen for 5 eternally long seconds. Then, she turned to Uriel once more. If the black ship is there, and we take it, we shall keep it, along with any other potential vessel stationed there, and any valuable equipment and information. Uriel shrugged. I only care about the station itself. Woodshaft can always use more space and landing docks. Saves me the trouble and money to create one from scratch. You can take whatever you want from it. In that case, we have a deal. You'll get your station, Uriel. Clara stood up and put on her helmet again. Until then, picking up the chit, she placed it within her armor. I'll keep this. Pleasure doing honest business with you, Princess, Uriel replied, taking out a second cigarette. I would hurry if I were you. Who knows what the Castons may do if you dilly-dally? The 3 left the room by the time Uriel was halfway done with his cigarette. Only after he was alone once more did he dare reach for the piece of paper resting before him and give it a second read. Now, with a cooler head and less frantic heartbeat, he noticed something that was missing from it. A royal signature. He chuckled to himself. Clever, Princess! Wyatt expected Clara to head back to the shuttle and organize an attack on the station. Instead, she asked him to guide her to the market stalls. He did so, of course, but after the meeting with Uriel was over, the 2 women had not spoken to him since. It had only been 10 minutes, but their silence was starting to worry him. Did I screw up by speaking out of turn? I hope I didn't bungle Clara's plan or anything like that. The one time I had to keep my mouth shut and I had to open it, Wyatt thought, wanting to kick himself for being so stupid. Behind the trio, their escort of Royal Marines followed closely and everyone gave them a wide berth. The only indication that Clara wasn't as mad as he thought she might be was the way her head turned from side to side, checking the stalls with mild interest. She'd stopped a few times, but didn't approach to any. That is, until she came to a sudden halt and slowly made her way to a stall selling tools, replacement parts, display screens, and, oddest of all things, several models of ships, tanks, and action figurines. He followed the princess closely along with Cynthia until she stopped in front of the stall. The owner, a sleazy-looking older man, leaned forth at the prospect of clients. Why, welcome, welcome. See anything catching your eye there? I assure you these be high-quality stuff. You ain't gonna find better prices and pieces in all of Woodshaft. I highly doubt that, Cynthia replied through a private channel. Wyatt? You are correct, Cynthia, Wyatt replied, and felt relieved when he didn't detect any hostility in her voice. Most of what I'm seeing is junk. There are a few good things here and there, but I think Clara isn't looking for equipment, he pointed out, and sure enough, Clara's focus was on the models. Before he could say anything, he watched as she lifted her right arm and pointed a finger at a model of an old Kenkyo Mk2 fighter, the ancient predecessor of the modern-day Raptor fighters. I want that one, Clara announced. Oh, this one? The shopkeeper asked, taking the model from the shelf. You have a keen eye, lady. This here model was found on an ancient cargo ship, part of a collection that belonged to Luminor Tintar, the first lone wolf himself. This be a rare model and a part of history. I mainly keep it for show, but if you wants it, I think I can let it go for 4,000 credits. I'll take Eep, Clara replied without hesitation, but was cut off by Wyatt taking a step forth and slamming a hand on the counter, startling her. "Do you think you can take us for fools?" Wyatt asked, with a serious voice. "If you don't want it, you can move along. This is a dear piece close to my heart," the shopkeeper replied with a smug grin. "Like hell it is. That thing can't cost more than 300 credits, 400 tops, and you're trying to scam us?" Wyatt pressed on. "I have a business to run, and you noble lot can afford it. Besides, I ain't lying. Look here," he said, and turned the model upside down to show a small carving with the letters LT under one of the model's wings. "I speaks the truth, don't I? It belonged to Luminor Tintar. That alone is worth the price I ask for." Wyatt inspected the carving for several moments, and he had to admit that those weren't made recently. The tear and wear of the model matched the chipped edges to the crude carving. "So am I to take your word for it? LT could mean anything or have belonged to anyone else but the first lone wolf. If it belonged to him, you wouldn't be selling it for so little. I offer 1,000 credits for it. 3,000, 1,200, 2,000 and a half, 1,300, 2,000, 1,500, and that's my final offer," Wyatt leaned forth. "Unless you think you can get lucky and have someone buy it for that much ever again." The shopkeeper smiled widely. "Deal. For a noble, sir, you know how to haggle. I can respect that. Here you go," he said, handing Wyatt the fighter model. In turn, Wyatt took out his credit chit and presented it to the shopkeeper, who also brought up his. The two touched, and a second later, the transaction was over. "If you need anything else, you know where to find my stall," the shopkeeper said, unable to hide the joy of a good profit. Wyatt stepped back, and with him the two women. Once they were several meters away from the stall, he turned to Clara and presented her with the model. "Here, it's yours," he said through a private channel. "Wyatt, 4,000 credits are nothing to me. I could have easily paid for it," Clara replied, using the channel instead of talking directly through his implant. He shrugged. "Maybe. But everyone here is a ravenous clicksole and will lie, cheat, and betray one another for a chance to earn a single credit more in any deal." He paused for a moment. "Besides, think of it as my way of saying sorry for meddling during your dealings with Uriel. You think you overstepped?" It was Cynthia who spoke up, confused. "Do not know the roles of a diplomatic entourage are to play? There are roles for that?" Wyatt asked, baffled. Then the soft giggling of the princess cut through the channel. "Oh, Wyatt, I was surprised you spoke when you did, but I am thankful that you did so. Truth be told, I had no idea what he was showing us initially. You saved me from a rather embarrassing moment of having to ask Uriel what it was." "Thank you, Wyatt," she replied and reached for the model, clutching it delicately in between her hands. "I've been looking everywhere for this model. They are so rare. Once you safely return, I shall pay you back for it." "Think nothing of it, Clara. Since you gave me those sweets, giving you something in return is the polite thing to do," he replied. "In that case, I shall not insist." "Thank you once more, Wyatt," Clara said. "Cynthia, I have decided on our course of action. We'll return to the shuttle, and from there you will proceed." "My princess," Cynthia replied, turning to face the Royal Marines. Wyatt didn't hear what she told them, but they all simultaneously saluted and turned around. As they followed their escort, something Clara said finally clicked in. "Wait, did she say once I safely return?"